Hi, this is documentary filmmaker John Ziegler. I'm also the guy who runs the website framingpaterno.com, and it's possible you may have seen me a couple months ago on the Today Show when I discussed with Matt Lauer my 3-hour prison interview with Jerry Sandusky. For the last year and a half or so, I've been investigating what really happened in the Sandusky scandal, and it's been my belief that Joe Paterno was railroaded. Well, tonight on CBS Evening News, there was an extraordinary report that previews a 60 Minutes sports on Showtime that's going to air tomorrow night, which I just had to detail for you. I do a lot of work on media malpractice. In fact, one of my documentary films was called Media Malpractice, about the 2008 election. And this is the quickest, easiest, and least expensive way for me to document what really happened in this Kayan report on CBS Evening News tonight, which really deserves special mention because it was completely outrageous on a number of fronts. What happened was that Kayan got an interview with two of the Jerry Sandusky prosecutors. Now, Kayan likes to think of himself as an investigative reporter, and he's actually in my documentary film, The Framing of Joe Paterno, when he reported back in November of 2011 that Penn State officials were aware of sexual assaults in the showers at Penn State in both 2000 and 2002. Well, that was flat out false on a couple of different levels. Penn State was never informed about the 2000 janitor episode, which may never even have happened. And of course, the McQuarrie episode didn't happen in 2002, it happened in 2001. So Kayan has a history of getting the facts wrong in this case. So I want to go through his report tonight. Scott Pelley, the anchor, gives an incredibly mundane intro, which totally ignores the lead of this story, which should be that the Sandusky prosecutor is now saying for the first time that Joe Paterno was not, underline, capitalized, headline, not involved in a cover-up. So let's go through what happened when Kayan does give his report. It will begin with, of course, some very journalistic pumping up of these two prosecutors, Fina and McGettigan, to make sure you know they're the good guys.
But what about the legendary head coach, Joe Paterno? Here's Kayan.
Frank Fina, then the Chief Deputy Attorney General for Pennsylvania, was the architect of the case against Sandusky. Joseph McGettigan III was the hammer, a seasoned, no-nonsense prosecutor. It took a while, Fina said, before the prosecutors realized that Penn State President Graham Spanier, Senior Vice President Gary Schultz, and Athletic Director Tim Curley were putting the school's brand above the repeated sexual abuse of young boys on its campus.
All right, let's stop there for a second. Kayan says it took prosecutors a while to figure out that these three were putting the Penn State brand above repeated sexual abuse on their campus. Repeated sexual abuse. These guys were never made aware of any repeated sexual abuse. There were 2 episodes in which any of them were remotely aware, and the first one was determined by law enforcement to be completely unfounded and, frankly, in retrospect, is being way overblown. It was not a big deal at all, and certainly not in Jerry Sandusky's mind was it a big deal. But to say that was repeated sexual assault is ridiculous. Law enforcement determined that 1998 was not an illegal act. And oh, by the way, the event that happened in 2001, the victim in that case, victim 2, has said as an adult, a married Sergeant in the Marine Corps, in no uncertain terms, 3 times publicly, that nothing happened in the Mike McQuarrie episode. So I asked Kayan on Twitter, could you tell me where and when these repeated sexual assaults occurred on campus? And I got a very nasty response that did not answer my question. Gee, I wonder why. Well, listen to what Fina then says after Kayan has already clearly set up where this piece is going.
You've got a massive multi-billion-dollar entity that at the time we don't realize, or that we would come to realize it, may not be fully committed to disclosing what the reality is. Of course, we come to realize that they're actively obstructing our investigation. And,
They're obstructing justice.
yeah, and they have been for many years.
Okay, Kayan because he wants to make sure that you fully realize the implications of what FINA is saying here. They are obstructing justice. So when FINA says we came to realize that those three, the Penn State administrators, were actively obstructing our investigation, you mean, Mr. FINA, like the day that they decided to voluntarily testify in front of a grand jury without their own attorneys? And by the way, told totally different stories on the details? Was that when they were obstructing justice? Was that when you realized that this was some sort of a cover-up? That's preposterous. It doesn't make any sense, and it's not consistent with the evidence. So we continue with what essentially is Armin Kayan purchasing on the behalf of the prosecution a national television commercial for the conviction of Graham Spanier, Gary Schultz, and Tim Curley, because that's what this is. It's a commercial.
In a detailed independent investigative report commissioned by the Penn State Board of Trustees, former FBI Director Louis Freeh found Spanier, Schultz, and Curley repeatedly concealed critical facts relating to Sandusky's child abuse from the authorities.
I think the evidence, now they're going to be tried on that.
I understand.
But I investigated that case. They deserve to be charged, and I hope justice will be served there.
Now that is an extraordinary statement coming from FINA. He has just further polluted the jury pool in the case of Spanier, Curley, and Schultz. And he has done that on purpose. And he has done that, I believe, with the help of Armin Kayan from CBS. Now, I'm not suggesting Kayan realizes that's what he was being used for, but that's effectively what has happened here. They are worried that they're going to get their asses handed to them in court, and now they, along with Penn State, who is helping in this, are polluting the jury pool so that Spanier, Curley, and Schultz cannot get a fair trial. Then the absurdity continues here.
Did you two ever look at each other and go, I can understand if they're covering up recruiting violations, but this is serial sexual abuse of children that they are institutionally resisting efforts to uncover?
Many times. I mean, that happened over and over again. I mean, you're just astonished.
You know what, some of the thinking on the simplest level, the simplest expression of their thinking is, well, that was then, that was Jerry Sandusky, it was someone else, this is now, let's move on, we are Penn State.
Okay, I don't even understand what that means. Can anyone explain to me what Joe McGettigan is trying to say there? Just a bunch of non sequiturs that mean nothing and ends with "we are Penn State." I'm totally confused. But now finally, 3 minutes in, we get to what should have been the lead of the entire program, at least with regard to Penn State on the CBS Evening News. And that is, Armin Kayan actually gets new information out of the attorney FINA. And watch what happens when FINA puts down a bombshell that, guess what? Contrary to popular belief, Joe Paterno was not involved in a cover-up. This is truly extraordinary.
Do you believe that Coach Paterno was a part of the conspiracy to conceal, to cover up the crimes at Penn State by Jerry Sandusky?
I do not, and I'm viewing this strictly on the evidence, not any kind of fealty to anybody. I did not find that evidence.
But you know as well as I do, Frank, Joe Paterno was the most powerful man on that campus, arguably the most powerful coach in college football. He knew what was going on in that university, and the argument is if he knew what he knew, he should have put a stop to it. He should have done more.
Well, that's right, and I don't see any need to judge him beyond his own words. He said it best. I didn't do enough. I should have done more.
Spanier, Schultz, and Curley had...
All right, enough of Armin Kayan. That is really amazing what just happened there. FINA says no evidence of a cover-up by Paterno. I don't believe Paterno was involved in a cover-up, he says. Kayan fights back. The prosecutor in the Sandusky case, Kayan says, well, that can't possibly be true. He doesn't do that based on any fact or evidence. He just does it on a feeling that Paterno had to have known, even though to this day, Dottie Sandusky, who knew Jerry a heck of a lot better than Joe Paterno did, especially in the last 11 years before his arrest, still to this day is 100% convinced not only that he didn't do anything criminal, that he was totally innocent in this case, and she's not delusional. I've spoken to her at great length about this. She truly believes it, and for good reason she truly believes it. So how Joe Paterno was supposed to know back in 2001 based on one conversation with a witness, Mike McQuarrie, who saw something through a mirror for 3 seconds, is completely beyond me. But then, Kayan not only fights the prosecutor, but he allows the prosecutor to misquote what Joe Paterno actually said. If you're going to say in his own words, he said this, you better at least get it right. Joe Paterno never said anything about I didn't do enough. He said, with the benefit of hindsight, I wish I had done more, which is a completely different statement. It was not about accepting some sort of guilt here. He's the only person who never took any responsibility for this. He deserves credit for that. And that statement has been completely misinterpreted, and in this case, misquoted by FINA and indirectly by Armin Kayan, who committed massive media malpractice here. For more information on this case, go to www.framingpaterno.com.